Good morning. I have my buddy Coda here helping me today. I want to continue to think about the book of Genesis and what it tells to what it says to us. And in Genesis 1:26 it says that God says, "Let us make human beings in our image as our likeness." And part of what we know that means is that Coda is different than me and different than you, even though Coda is a beautiful animal and he is an amazing critter. He's not a human being and he's not in the image of God. But what does that mean? In the image of God they were made. We started this week talking about the Babylonians and the Babylonian creation myth of Tiamat and Marduk slays Tiamat and creates the earth out of her body and the heavens out of the other half of her body. And what that shows us is that for the Babylonians, the gods were made of the same stuff that we are made of. And so the stuff of earth is the stuff of us. And then human beings are made out of the blood of another god. And yet the story in Genesis, sometimes we take to mean, well, we human beings are so much better than all the other critters, or so much far above the horses of the world or others of the world. And there's something to that, of course. We do have more technology, and we are created in God's image. And yet this passage reminds us that in spite of the fact that we are created in God's image, let's take a half a step back and realize we're not created out of the same stuff that God is created out of. And the same stuff that I am created out of, Coda is created out of, But we are created differently, of course. And the difference is that you and I are created in the image of God. And people have wondered for a millennia, what does that mean? Does it mean that we are ethical, or that we are spiritual, or that we are relational? And all of those things are true. All of that is true for us as people, and that is part of what that means. But ultimately what it means most is, I think, that we are the type of creature God would be if God became a creature. And you know where I'm going with that, but we'll get there in a moment. I was watching a video the other day about some archaeology in Egypt. I'll let you go, buddy. About some archaeology in Egypt. And they were unearthing this long, 2-mile long stretch of road that had all of these gigantic sphinxes all along this stretch of road, an avenue of sphinxes. And as they're excavating out from under one of the sphinxes, they found this tiny little sphinx that was kind of buried in the rubble, just the fill dirt that they had used after they had installed the sphinx. There's this tiny little model of the larger sphinx that was there on the road. And the idea is that tiny little model was probably an apprentice was watching the master carver, and as the master carver is carving this huge, beautiful sphinx, the apprentice is carving the model and learning how to do that work. And if the apprentice can do it in the small scale, then they can do it in the bigger scale. And there's a sense in which I think that's sort of almost the reverse of what God does. So we have God, who is the master model of what it means to be ethical or spiritual or relational, whatever you want to say. And God creates us as a tiny little model of that. And yet in Egypt, that little model was seen to have no real purpose except for fill dirt, and it was just thrown in underneath the larger model. For us, we recognize, first, we are not God. We are not made of the same stuff that God is made of. We are part of creation, just like horses and grass and everything else is a part of creation. And yet, we are made in the image of God, and that means that it's our job to almost be like that apprentice. As we build and shape our lives, we are to build and shape our lives after God's life. We want to resemble God. Well, there's that wonderful prayer attributed to St. Francis that may all who see me see Christ in me. And it goes on and on and on about how everything I say, they would hear the words of Christ. And everything I do, they would see the actions of Christ. That's what we are called to do. And that's what it means that we are created in the image of God. Not so much that we are highfalutin and we're better than all the other creation, but that we have the opportunity to be little models of what it looks like to be God, to be this joyful, loving, spiritual, ethical person who is created. Or of course God isn't created, but who is able to be in relationship. And of course, if we take that definition that we are the type of creature that God would be if God became a creature, we see why when God was ready to come incarnate, to become in the flesh on the earth, God came not as a horse, but God came as a human being in the person of Jesus Christ. So take these wonderful truths. I hope they bring you great joy this day, and then go out and apply them as you live a God-like life. We do this, of course, because God is with us. Amen.